Hereditary is an interesting movie with a lot of things going on. It is a slow burn, half character study and half psychological horror movie, with some occult oddities mixed in for good measure. Ultimately, I'm not sure how I feel about it. Content warning. This video will contain references and images of violent deaths, dead bodies, mutilation of dead animals and people, Satanism, and the occult. If any of these things are triggering or spooky for you, I get that, and I would suggest another video. This video will contain spoilers for Hereditary. If you don't want the movie spoiled, go ahead and watch another video, or the movie, whichever. The film opens on Steve Graham, who is played by Gabriel Byrne, collecting his two children to go to their maternal grandmother's funeral. Her daughter, Annie, played by Toni Collette, gives the eulogy, and it becomes immediately apparent that they had a strained relationship. Their daughter, Charlie, played by Millie Shapiro, is drawing during the funeral, and her father has to put a stop to this. It's also revealed that she has an allergy to nuts.
There aren't nuts in that either.
No. Does that have nuts? Because we don't have the EpiPen.
No.
The family gets home, and Annie goes through some of her mother's stuff and finds a letter from her promising better things to come, and she seems to see her mother as a ghost. She goes to bed, and we cut to Charlie in school, avoiding her quiz so that she can work on making some kind of doll. A bird slams into the window, and a little later, Charlie cuts off its head with a rather effective pair of scissors. She collects the head and leaves the rest of the body. A woman can be seen from across the street, and the two have a staring contest for a while. Steve gets a call from the cemetery, and apparently someone has fucked with Grandmama's grave. He decides not to tell his wife about this because she already seems to be going through a lot, and he doesn't want to add to that stress. Annie lies to her husband about going to a movie and instead visits a grief counseling center. She is reticent to talk at first, but then reveals that she has a long, complicated history with her mom.
My mom was old, and she wasn't altogether there at the end. And we were pretty much estranged before that, so it really wasn't a huge blow.
The woman apparently had dissociative identity disorder and was constantly going through a cycle of pushing people away and pulling them back.
And she didn't have an easy life. She had DID, which became extreme at the end, and dementia. And my father died when I was a baby.
Annie's brother had committed suicide, and the note claimed that the mother had put people inside of him.
My older brother had schizophrenia, and when he was 16, he hanged himself in my mother's bedroom, and of course his suicide note blamed her, accusing her of putting people inside him. So
Annie cut all contact with the help of Steve until she had her second kid, who Grandma becomes immediately attached to. It was implied a little bit earlier in the movie that Grandma wouldn't even let Annie to be close to Charlie and was her primary caretaker. Peter, played by Alex Wolff, is invited to a party, and Annie insists that he take Charlie along because he lied and said it was a school function. He meets up with a girl that he likes and offers to share some of the devil's lettuce. He convinces Charlie to get some cake and do a bit of drawing. The cake has nuts in it, and when she starts going into anaphylactic shock, Peter panics and starts to drive her home since they don't have an EpiPen on her for some reason. While driving back, she rolls down the window and sticks her head out, trying to get some more air. Peter swerves to avoid a dead deer in the middle of the road, and Charlie is decapitated by a pole since her head was out of the window, and the pole was probably too close to the road. They bury their daughter, and even the funeral shows a rift between Peter and his parents. Annie starts sleeping in a treehouse where Charlie slept a lot of the time. Peter starts freaking out after smoking pot, obviously having a really hard time coping with this loss. Annie stops by the grief counseling center again, but can't bring herself to go in. She has a talk with a woman named Joan, played by Ann Dowd, who offers her number if she needs to talk. Annie accepts it. Peter starts sensing a presence inside of his room, but can't see anything yet. Annie visits Joan, who has a welcome mat that is similar to the ones that Annie's mother used to make, and I swear that's actually important.
Oh, Annie, you came.
Your welcome mat.
Oh, it's kind of cute, huh?
Yeah, my mother used to embroider ones just like that.
Did she really? Isn't that funny?
They talk for a while, and Annie reveals that at some point when Charlie and Peter shared a room, Annie apparently was sleepwalking, only to find herself and her children covered in paint thinner with a lit match in her hand. This understandably freaked Peter the fuck out, and he started screaming. Annie also starts to craft a scene of dolls in the position of Charlie's death as a part of the grieving process. The family has dinner, and at first it's amicable, but Peter and Annie are obviously uncomfortable. Peter presses on, asking, "Annie, are you walking? Are you walking, Annie?" And Annie snaps and says that she's sacrificing everything for him, which is a little gaslighty, and that she wishes that she could take away his guilt and his pain for what he did, implying that she believes that this is his fault.
Okay, so try again. Release yourself.
Oh, release you mean?
Yeah, fine. Release me. Just say it. Just fucking say it.
Don't you swear at me, you little shit! Don't you ever raise your voice at me! I am your mother! All I do is worry and slave and defend you, and all I get back is that fucking face on your face! Well, now your sister is dead! And I know you miss her, and I know it was an accident, and I know you're in pain, and I wish I could take that away for you. I wish I could shield you from the knowledge that you did what you did.
Peter, obviously hurt, bites back. He says Charlie never wanted to come to the party, and that it was Annie's fault. Steve calls off the argument, and Annie fucks off to her study to make more creepy dolls, presumably. Annie comes out of Joel's art supply, and speaking of Joel, check out Don't Joel Me Gaming, linked down below. He's a great guy and a pretty interesting YouTuber. While she's there, she sees Joan putting stuff away. They catch up, and Joan reveals that she's spoken to a medium. She and Annie go back to her place and have some kind of seance, with a cup that moves and then a blackboard that the ghost writes on. Annie freaks out, but Joan presses the instructions of how to do it into her hands, and Annie bolts, which is entirely fair. Annie goes to bed and wakes up only to find ants everywhere. She follows them back to Peter's room, and he is covered entirely in ants. She screams, and he wakes up, freaking out. Peter asks why she was doing this to him, why she's afraid of him.
What are you doing?
What's going on?
Why are you scared of me?
She lets it slip out that she never wanted him.
I never wanted to be your mother.
Jeff, I think you should play the role of my father.
I don't want to be your father.
It's perfect, you already know your lines.
And tried to miscarry him, but it failed. He's distraught by this, because who isn't? Then we see them covered in some kind of liquid, presumably paint thinner. Flames sprout up immediately. She wakes up and goes about doing the seance, and it seems to work. She then wakes up both Steve and Peter and wrangles them as well. Weird, spooky stuff starts happening. She speaks with Charlie's voice, and Peter cannot handle it. Steve dumps some water on her face, and that breaks the trance. It's a little surprising that she didn't just actually melt like a witch, but I don't know the rules of this universe. Maybe witches are immune to water. Peter, while in school, sees his reflection, who starts flirting with him with a really nice smile. Steve talks to Annie and says that Peter's becoming hysterical and thinks that an evil spirit is around him. Annie destroys her workshop and then finds Charlie's drawing book being drawn in, seemingly by itself. You know, kids these days, all of this technology, now we have self-drawing notebooks. Come on. Peter wakes up and sees Charlie, whose head falls off and then becomes a ball. Then two hands grab him by the throat and try to pull him down, quote, trying to pull his head off. Annie tries to burn Charlie's notebook, but she magically catches fire, too. She pulls the notebook out of the flames and puts it out, which also extinguishes the flames on her. Annie goes back to Joan for some help, but she seems to be gone. We get an internal view of the apartment, with Annie trapped outside of it. It reveals some kind of candle ritual, with a table that had a triangle carved deep into it, with Peter's picture in the center of it. There are candles everywhere, which seems like a fire hazard. Always put your candles out. We cut to Peter, who sees Joan across the street. She is screaming at him to get out. But honestly, who hasn't had that happen to them at least once? Annie goes back to her mother's stuff and finds a photo album that has Joan's picture in it. They're both wearing a necklace with some kind of symbol on it that is also on a book in her mother's stuff. She finds a part about some kind of god of mischief, King Paimon. Paimon likes to possess men because they have thick, girthy bodies. She then goes upstairs and finds a dead body.
Hey kids, want to see a dead body?
That has had its head removed. I guess that's a bit of a motif, huh? The symbol has also been painted on the wall in blood, because of course it has. Peter becomes possessed and bashes his skull against his desk and just generally flips the fuck out.
Can he breathe?
But honestly, who wouldn't if they had to listen to some pretentious fuck talk about symbolism? Wait. Fuck. I'm that, aren't I? Shit. Well, put a pillow on your desk to avoid as much damage as possible, I guess. Steve picks up his son from school and takes him home instead of taking him to the fucking hospital. Annie convinces him to go up into the attic and confirm that the body is actually there. She then tries to convince him to burn Charlie's book, but he falters. She throws it into the fireplace, and Steve lights up like the fucking Hindenburg. Peter wakes up and wanders around looking for his parents. He finds Steve extra crispy. We see Mom practicing her best Spider-Man and some naked people in the closet, which is my favorite place to have naked people. He runs away and Annie chases him. He manages to get up into the attic and locks her out, and she bashes her head against the attic door like a madwoman. And he looks around. Grandma's body is gone, replaced with a picture of Peter with its eyes pierced out. He then sees Mom floating up at the ceiling, garroting herself. Then there's some more naked people, and he's like, fuck this, and yeets himself out of the window. We see a dark spirit leave his body, and a little white one crawl inside of him. He wakes up and goes to the treehouse. They've redecorated a bit, put up a cool statue with his sister's head on it. Joan crowns him and says that he is Paimon. Apparently Charlie had been possessed with him the whole time, and they somehow orchestrated all of this so that he could have a better vessel, because again, they want a thick, girthy body. They also reject the Trinity and love Paimon, who is one of Lucifer's best buds. Neat.
If it could have maybe brought us together or something. If you could have just said, I'm sorry, or faced up to what happened. Maybe, man, we could do something with this.
So this movie is pretty well done. Toni Collette does a really good job of portraying someone who is on the edge of sanity. So does Peter. It also clearly illustrates the way that people can manipulate you into doing things that you don't want to do. Joan knows that they are grieving and pushes herself into Annie's life. She is a comforting presence, but she's nefarious. She gaslights Annie into doing things she doesn't want to do. It's soft and subtle in some ways, but it's there. Annie's mother also apparently would go through cycles of manipulating her. It's key to her success as a cult leader. Cults will always prey on the gullible and the mentally unstable as a means of collecting new followers. They're con artists, and people should always have the most skeptical eye when someone is claiming anything about the dead or the afterlife, which I know is pretty difficult. And if you are prone to mental illness, you should try to make sure to have a support network that is trying to help you. Annie and Peter both end up isolating themselves, and that cuts them off from potential help that they could have used to prevent all of this. They don't rely on each other, and their friends and family are distant. That's one of the reasons this movie works. It's entirely possible that the ghosts are just manifestations of their grief, and shame stops them from getting the help that she needs. So that was an adventure, right? Turns out that it was Satan's and ghosts the whole time. Maybe. Or perhaps Annie, her mother, and Peter are all just bonkers and surrounded by other bonkers people. It is called Hereditary, after all. This movie does try to have it both ways. It does the thing that a lot of movies kind of do, where it's purposefully vague and obtuse about whether or not the events are actually happening. I think that they are, mostly because I feel multiple people hallucinating around the same time is a bit more of a stretch. But I could be wrong. Sopayamon is back, and the movie doesn't really comment on what that means. Whether or not it means the apocalypse is going to happen, or what. It's left pretty vague. And while I know that the Seance is a ruse by Joan, it does, to one degree or another, legitimize the practice of preying on vulnerable, grieving people for a grift. Joan's grift is to summon a demon, which exists in the universe, I guess. But someone like John Edwards or other con artists' grift is to take money from people when they're stricken with grief and are upset. And movies like this and Ouija legitimize that to one degree or another. I guess so does Ghostly Bodies, but I also try to lampshade the ridiculousness of that and make sure that people are aware it's nonsense. And unlike Crimson Peak, this movie is all about the spiritual aspects, which is okay, I guess. I want to say this. If you are grieving, it is okay to seek out help. A counseling group, or counseling in general, is okay. But if someone comes up to you and says that they can speak to the dead and make contact with them, please know that they're full of shit. Please know that they're just out to get your money and are manipulating you.
Okay, I'm gonna pretend that a dead person is talking to me about you, okay?
Okay.
It's an older man, someone very close to you.
My father?
Does this month, November, hold a special significance?
My birthday's in November!
Right, because he's saying tell her happy birthday.
Oh my god!
See, Kyle, I just started with something really vague. I chose older man because I'm betting that based on this woman's age, her father is most likely dead. But if her father wasn't dead, I could still say it was some other older man.
I know this because I used to pretend to be a psychic when I was in high school. Cold reading and hot reading are really easy to do. Hot reading is easier than ever with social media. Anyway, I guess that's Hereditary. It's well shot, and the story works pretty well. It rides the line of insanity and reality pretty well for a long time up until the reveal. If you want a more ridiculous ghost story, check out Ghostly Bodies, linked down below. I just finished the whole story a while ago, and you can now read it for free. So that's pretty cool. If there's a movie that you want me to review, please let me know down in the comments. And do all of the other YouTube stuff, like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends. Just hack their phones so that it opens every time they unlock the screen. It'll be a really funny prank. Until next time, I'm Sean, formerly psychic movie reviewer, signing off. Annie, are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay, Annie?
Get this damn thing off my neck.